Hello everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. Hope you're doing great today. I decided that I was going to release a video comparing INFJs and INTJs in matters of sensitivity. So in relation to the question of sensitivity, you might already know why I'm choosing this topic. It's because I released a video yesterday on that question, and I'm still reflecting upon it, mulling it over, the sensitivity of INFJs. And I have to say, I received a number, in fact, most of your comments, guys, I have to say. I read pretty much all your comments all the time. I don't always remember to like them or heart them, but I do read them. And I have to say, just as a preamble, I think that the comments that were contributed to my last video on INFJ sensitivity and the comparison with INFP by way of a standard, they've been perhaps the highest level comments that I've gotten this year. And in fact, they have made me kind of switch my position a little bit. So I'll try to explain that. But like I said, almost all of your comments, like whether they be from Red Bull, INTP person, or Coneman, or from Elodie, INTJ, and also from Todd Bryan, but honestly, almost all of you guys have brought perspectives on this question of sensitivity in INFJs that are just forcing me, in a sense, to update my position, and I have to discuss this, but I want to do it again through, hopefully achieve doing that through the prism of some kind of comparison with INTJ sensitivity by way of a standard, as opposed to INFP. But again, I have to say, there are certain situations where I read the comments and they just compel me to update my position. I have to update my position, and I will make that clear almost straight away. Just before that, remember that I've written this new book on the INFJ, The Infinite Soul. It's just out, and the link is right below in ebook and paperback. It's a great book, according to the feedback I've been getting so far. It's a sequel to the Ecstatic Soul. You might notice that the books are basically, it's very clear they're part of the series. I maybe don't even need to introduce the Ecstatic Soul. It's it's a bestseller in INFJ literature. Get it if you haven't got a copy yet. It looks at INFJ psyche. This takes the INFJ psyche analysis from the Ecstatic Soul and looks at INFJ life in the modern world. So finding meaning, purpose, and so on, as an INFJ in the world today. Get this book, and it's full of insights, at least that's the way I want it, for other types as well. It has an INFJ angle, but it's not as centrally INFJ as this one is. This one, the INFJ, if you like, is a central character, but there are insights for other types too. So do these two books, and don't forget, there's my Patreon page, and don't underestimate how much Patreon support helps me too. There's a link down there, so if you want to support my work, do that, and I will be eternally grateful. Right, so first of all, maybe let's start by looking at how the comments in my previous video have led me to update my position somewhat. Essentially, I was trying to argue that INFJs as NI leads, as people whose most sensitive function, which for me is TI, function of introverted judgment, an inner critic function almost by essence, that means that in fact the sensitivity of INFJs can be intense but more localized, can come in bursts, right? Whenever you touch the nerve of the NI-TI connection. Whereas for someone like an INFP leading with FI, introverted judgment function, there seems to be a constant interaction with the world whereby the sensitivity is everywhere, but it's more spread out, and therefore it's less susceptible to have these big bursts where it feels as if the NI bubble can be just in the film can be pierced, and it's incredibly painful. That can lead INFJs to think that they're extremely sensitive, perhaps the most sensitive of all types. But my argument was that they're more locally sensitive. So perhaps the peaks of intensity in sensitivity are more powerful, but they're not globally sensitive in the same way that FI lead might be, okay? So that was my basic insight. Now, the contributions from the viewers to the video, but you can still read, of course, you can read them, and I encourage you to read them. Basically, they're bringing different perspectives. So on the one hand, you have Coleman saying, what about the NI sensitivity? Can't we make the case that in the same way that there is a sensitivity of introverted judgment, the inner critic, NI is also sensitive. Then you have Red Bull, who's making the point that SE, or the S functions, he thinks SE and SI he puts them in the same bag, but I think SE is, the higher you have it, the more resistant to sensitivity you are, right? Taking examples that I think are quite convincing. Elodie, INTJ, arguing that she finds INTJs to be less sensitive than she is because she possesses FI and we possess TI. And so if we start from the notion that FI is more sensitive than TI overall, then maybe we can make sense of that. But certainly even her one-person perspective is important to take on board. And then we have Todd Bryan, who's essentially asking if I could compare INFJs and INTJs more. He's not specifically asking me to do that through the prism of sensitivity, but since this has been my topic lately, this is what I want to do now, because I just think it makes sense to remain within that topical tunnel, if you like. So, I'm starting to think that it probably, to some extent, is too crude. It's striking me now that it's too crude to speak of a most sensitive type, or of a least sensitive type. And that even the distinction between global sensitivity and local sensitivity, it's good. I think it's a progress. Again, if you remember in my previous video, I talked about the crudest distinction in sensitivity being between T and F. Then we progress further. We can progress further toward identifying the various classes in terms of cognitive functions rather than just dichotomies. I think that suggesting that certain types are locally sensitive and other types are globally sensitive is yet again a step forward. But at the same time, I mean, I'm just led now to think that Coleman, for example, is right. There is a sensitivity that accrues to the dominant NI function that is obviously not going to manifest in the case of an INFP who doesn't have NI, right? Or an INTP who doesn't have NI. So it might just be a case of the fact that what we understand by sensitivity is historically, and due to our conditioning, including maybe the Myers-Briggs conditioning, something that we still associate with certain functions and not others. And you could make the case that there are functions that have their own particular kind of sensitivity, right? Now, you could even make the case about SE that it does, although I would agree provisionally with Red Bull that SE, I think, not SI, I don't think SI is I think SI can be quite sensitive actually to bodily states. But SE, someone who's very highly developed SE, seems someone who's highly, strongly SE dominant people tend to be very resilient to sensitivity or to sensitive things. Doesn't mean they don't feel them, but they can plow forward, refresh and plow forward. It's much more difficult, probably for those who have dominant introverted functions. I mean, let's just face the reality. But just to bring the conversation a little bit toward this promise of comparing with the INTJ, you see, before we can actually begin to say reasonable, intelligent things about INTJ sensitivity in comparison with INFJ sensitivity, before we can do that, there's something needs to be done first of all, and that is to explode the probably still dominant picture of the INTJ as the villain that we see in films. I've talked about that in a recent video as well, by the way, and of course I still stand by what I said. A lot of the INTJs that we think are INTJs and are really hard, right? My view, they're ENTJs. Or sometimes they're not even ENTJs, but they're other extroverted thinker types. It's not, in fact, it's not unusual, and this might surprise you. It's not even that unusual for ESTPs to identify to think that they are INTJs. INTJs have, look at it, right? So they're an I dominant. They have extroverted thinking as an auxiliary. Extroverted thinking, by definition, extroverted function, right? They project a certain mode of reasoning with TE. What they project and what people read off that projection is different from what they feel, okay? It's the same all the time. It's the same with what INFJs project with FE as well, and it's the same with other types. It's different from what they feel. INTJs do have an inner critic. It's an FI inner critic, if we call that. It's a bit of a shortcut, but you know, the function of introverted judgment. So really, I have to say that if you look at the matter as coolly and impartially as possible, you don't really see evidence that INTJs are built to be more resistant, you know, or more, more resilient than INFJs. They're built to come across harsher because of TE, because of the TE-FI axis. That's always the case. Even an INFP comes across colder than an INTP, for instance, because of the FI-TE axis. But coming across, what can be read of the way you express things, very different from your actual sensitivity. The real INTJ, not the INTJ who is really an ENTJ or something different, interpreted via the I function, because there is this attachment to the myth of the cold calculating strategist who's able to compartmentalize feelings with prodigious efficiency. That's a T dominant thing. But it's, you know what, even more so than a T dominant thing, and this brings us back to what our friend Red Bull was saying about the SE function. It's T SE together, huh? If you have a strongly developed SE function, that can happen if your SE function is tertiary, that can really help with your resilience. And in this case, you have a combination with what manifests through T dominance as sometimes cold harshness and actual resilience, the INTJ. INTJ can't really have that because their SE function is just the same as the SE function of an INFJ. So it's not going to bring them any more resilience than the INFJ possesses. So what INTJs will have that's different from INFJs is really this mode of demonstration, this mode of justification, this mode of expression, this mode of articulation, which is done through extroverted thinking, which will, in a sense, will be bullshit free, will have all the the distanciation, the non-FE distanciation that's characteristic of the FITE axis, can come across sometimes unfriendly, sometimes cold, sometimes non-altruistic, or whatever you want to call it. But in many ways, that's just a dressing over what's really going on. So upon further scrutiny, I have to say I see no evidence, and I cannot think of any evidence that INTJs are less sensitive than INFJs. Certainly lots and lots of evidence that they project very efficiently this image. But no evidence that the actual world, when it comes to actually living the world, being in the world, facing events and things and people that require us to have strong resilience, no evidence that INTJs are going to do better than INFJs at this. And here I have to resonate with Elodie, and I'm also answering Todd. Consider this. Consider how often the INTJ that we see in fiction, that is obviously an image or a myth so influential on people who want to be INTJs online, by hook or by crook, consider how often they really are somewhat introverted ENTJs. It makes so much more sense with dominant T and strong SE, which is something not accessible to INTJs. So here are elements of my revised position. Please let me know what you think. This is bound to create more controversy and more fascinating comments from you. Okay, so again, If you like my book, please review it. Give it a good review, helps with referencing, as well as giving a thumbs up to this video. Okay, guys? And don't forget my Patreon page. See you on Wednesday, perhaps before that, through my shorts that I'm trying to do more of lately. Okay? Take care. Bye-bye.